Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is the highlights from last week's stream. I know it took me a little bit longer to get this together, some of the best questions from last week, but we had a massive stream. Went for over an hour and a half. Unbelievable questions that came through, broke all sorts of records in terms of numbers of people in the stream, people commenting, leaving their questions, and that's why I went so long. So I had a lot to go through and pick out some of the best ones. So hopefully you enjoy some of the content here. As always, if you're interested in the channel, you're getting some good information out of it, click the subscribe button down below to keep up to date when we're going live, when new videos are coming out outside of those live streams, and also for these highlights videos too. Go over and check out Instagram as well. If you've got a specific question that you want to ask me directly, best way to get in touch is to go over and check out Instagram, go give me a follow and send me a direct message. I'll leave it down the bottom corner here at NJ_sportscience. Easiest way to get directly in touch. Always going to respond, always going to send a response back. Might lead to a video. It might also lead to a great discussion in a live stream because I'm sure someone else is probably thinking the same question as well. So without any further ado, let's get stuck into the best clips and best parts of our live stream from last week. So without any further ado, let's get stuck into our first question of this evening. I'll bring it up on the screen here. There we go. That's a little bit easier to read for us now. First question coming through. I'm suffering hard DOMS, so delayed onset muscle soreness, for those of you a bit unfamiliar with DOMS. After my first track session and from downhill mountain running, could I do some easy running or cycling, or would you recommend something else? Follow up to that, I'm so sore I struggle walking. Unfortunate to hear that you're sort of struggling to walk after some of those sessions, and it's never a fun feeling. We've all experienced DOMS at some point, and really all DOMS are just a combination of a bit of muscle damage and a little bit of that sort of, I guess, byproduct accumulation, lactic acid, if you like. So really a really good way to deal with DOMS is do things that make you feel better as a primary function. A lot of it can come down to the psychological component. That's why when we talked about recovery methods before, so much of it comes down to if it makes you feel like you're recovering better, it's probably worthwhile. Go and do it. We obviously just need to go, the more you can just rest and recover, the better, essentially, because any further training, so if you go out and do, if you're describing an easy run as like a zone 2 run, for example, you're still aerobic, you might be pushing yourself a little bit there, not super hard, but you're still working. And same for cycling, you might be just sort of, I guess, negating any recovery effect. If you're talking really, really low level, if you're a runner, I'd probably suggest the bike just to deload the impact off the legs is going to be a beneficial one for you to help reduce those DOMS. Get the legs moving, get the blood flowing, muscles sort of contracting and relaxing. It's going to help to pump the blood around the system a bit better, flush out any of those byproducts and lactic acid accumulation that's sitting in the legs particularly. We're obviously going to get a lot of accumulation down the lower body because we're standing upright. When you run, gravity pushes everything down, so blood flow actually has to work against gravity to get back up to the heart. So some cycling is going to help with that process. You might even find something I like doing after hard sessions or game day or events. I did it yesterday after my run, actually, my interval session. Jumped down on the ground and chucked my legs up a wall. So it does look a little bit silly, but what you're doing is you're inverting your body. So you actually see a lot of footballers start to do it at half time. You might see cricketers do it after a long period of time as well. If you lie on the ground and put your legs up a wall, gravity's now pushing that blood back down to your heart. So it's actually assisting that process without you having to continue to move. Short periods is really useful, and just be mindful when you stand back up, you might feel a little bit dizzy if you get up too quick. That can be a good one. Things like foam rolling, if you've got foam rolling, recovery boots, the massage guns. I don't have it here, it's actually in the other room. The massage gun I've been using for the last little while, I've been finding really good just after the run, just to give me a little bit of that sort of, just get some blood flow happening to some of the areas where I feel a little bit sore. Again, promoting blood flow, and if it is going to promote that feeling of you feel a bit better. From a DOMS perspective and reducing the sensation of pain, cold water therapy or ice baths are really good at that. Where I tend to direct away from them, though, is they're really good for short term and when we've got short term turnarounds. So if you're doing a run in the morning and you need to back up in the afternoon and you're trying to deal with the DOMS, get in the cold water is going to be useful, sort of try to get as cool as you possibly can. If you can head to a beach, or if you fill up a bathtub, a rubbish bin, whatever it might be, try to get as cool as possible. And that's going to help reduce that sensation of, I guess, pain associated with DOMS too. But the downside is it inhibits some of our longer term chronic adaptations. And that's why I say it's probably only worthwhile if you're doing a double session in the day rather than, and you're doing a run in the morning and then another run in the afternoon. That's probably the best time. Or if you're racing twice in the day as well, you're doing a multi-stage event, things like that, ice baths in between can be useful. When we're talking about doing one session in the day, I probably would try some of these other methods first. And really anything that gives you a bit of relief from the pain and the DOMS is going to be good. Continuing to move obviously is a good strategy, like I said. Let's get stuck into our next question though. Do you use coffee brackets caffeine as a performance enhancer? Yes, I do. I think every endurance athlete has done it at some point. If you do any cycling, it's kind of ingrained in the sport that you're on the caffeine side of things. I've read quite a lot of positive effects, typically in lower perceived effort at the same pace intensity. In terms of caffeine as a performance enhancer, there had traditionally been some, just working off the nutrition and the carbohydrate side we were just talking about, there has been some little bits of information here and there asking about or thinking about, is there a glycogen sparing effect by using caffeine? I don't think there's too much to look into there. Pretty sort of minimal effective. If you're having caffeine, it's going to delay the amount of carbohydrates we burn. Can't spit out my words. But in terms of the major effects of caffeine, we're mainly looking at decreasing the perception of effort. So reducing RPE. So we're running along the same pace, back end of an Ironman, you're cruising along zone 2 intensity. Instead of it feeling like a 3 out of 10, you're already a bit fatigued. So it probably starts to feel like a 5 out of 10. Having a bit of caffeine is going to reduce that sensation, increases a bit of alertness in our concentration as well, which is key at the back end of those races. That's also why you'll see on Ironman courses, they'll offer electrolyte, sports drink, water, and things like Red Bull is something that they have on a lot of courses, or flat Coke is a big favourite of mine. I'm not a big Red Bull fan, but flat Coke at the end of a 70.3 end of last year was unbelievably good. In terms of training side of things and just day to day, I think something that we have to keep in mind with caffeine, and great that I actually remembered this and thought of this to share with you, is think about your daily intake of caffeine and what that looks like. There has been a bit of research to show that when we get into a race, if you've got really high caffeine intake day to day, so you're having a couple of coffees a day, you're having energy drinks or Red Bull, whatever, when you get into the race, having a little bit of caffeine isn't going to do massive amounts because you're kind of immune to it. It's almost like addiction with drugs. The more you have in your system chronically, the more it takes for you to then get the effects or the benefits. So if you get addicted, like painkillers, for example, you then need more to actually feel that pain relief, because the body kind of just goes, that didn't do anything. I need more. Same thing with caffeine. You have caffeine at the beginning. You have caffeine like twice a day, 3 times a day, every day. You get into your race and try and take some. It's not going to do much for you. I've in the past tried to go off caffeine for periods of time. Might have a full day without having a coffee. It is a bit of a struggle at times, but if I combat that with really good sleep and really good nutrition, hydration, I'm going to be able to get through. And reducing that reliance day to day on it then allows you in a performance setting, it just goes bananas. I remember sort of like that 70.3 from last year, I was taking flat Coke at the end. Why did it have such a good effect was, one, because I struggled to take gels on the run anyway, and I wasn't getting many carbs in, so the sugar was helping me big time. But the caffeine at the back end hit me real quick because I hadn't really had I wasn't having regular coffees in the sort of 2 months leading up, but I was deliberately not having as many coffees because I wanted to just make sure that any caffeine effect I was going to have at the end of my race was actually going to work. So it's the type of thing that you want to be careful about, that routine intake and daily intake, to make sure that on race day it makes as much of a difference as it possibly can, rather than you get to race day and you're just taking maybe a caffeine tablet, or you're taking Coke, or you're taking Red Bull just for the sake of it, and all then you're getting is the carbohydrate, which is okay. You're getting the sugar benefit out of it, but you're not getting the caffeine effect. It's like, well, what's the point of taking it? Just have another gel or have another cup of sports drink or electrolyte or something else. So I think that's really critical. So keep that in mind when we are talking about caffeine. Definitely something to consider. Would I recommend VO2 testing for recreational runners? Absolutely. And I'll bring the question back up because I've just sort of rambled there for the highlights video. Would recreational runners benefit from VO2 testing? Majority of the clientele that I work with when we are doing testing in the lab are what we call recreational or amateur athletes. Whether you're a top-end age group, top 5, top 10, whether you're mid-pack, whether you're just getting into the sport, you could also be a professional athlete. Anyone can benefit from VO2 testing. If anything, the lower you are on the performance scale, so if we're talking brand new beginner athlete, hope I'm doing this the right way, brand new beginner athlete all the way through to elite athlete, the people who are elite at the top end, who you commonly see getting the testing, they're just looking for 1 or 2% gains at most. The people who are at the lower end, beginners, amateur athletes, recreational runners, that type, you've typically got 5 to 10% that we can tap into by doing a test and understanding specifically what physiological aspects we need to target from a VO2 test. And this is what we go through our process at METS, but other places might offer this as well. A lot of places where you get your VO2 testing might just do the test and then just kind of give you the data and sort of that's it, nothing more. We go through it a little bit more in depth in terms of analysing training zones, providing some recommendations around types of training sessions. Email me through your data. I can break it down, have a look how I would normally from the data that we collect, break down some training zones, provide some recommendations, and take you through a little bit of that process. Happy to do that. We've had plenty of athletes do that before, bring in data sets externally, particularly those who are interstate or overseas who can't come into our lab and get their testing done with us. Being able to send through your data can be really powerful. So definitely think it's worthwhile doing. There is always usually a cost involved, which is what a lot of people start to consider. This type of thing, we like to think at METS, we do a reasonable job of trying to keep the costs down because we want people to be able to come in and do the testing, make it as accessible as we can to everyone. Because like everyone can benefit from doing a test. You just got to know what to do with the data afterwards. And that's what we pride ourselves on. And that's what I've always prided myself on. So if you do have some data out there you want to send through and get some more insight or a different opinion on what it actually means, happy to help and do what I can to sort of provide you a little bit more of assistance in that regard. Quick question on long runs. Is there a length of time run that the body benefits more? Example, 2-hour run is more beneficial than a 1 hour or 2 1 hour. Yeah, good one. Really, when it comes to long, slow running, the key component of it is it has to be a minimum of 20 minutes. So when we are doing anything aerobic in nature, trying to develop aerobic capacity, first and foremost, it has to be a minimum of 20 minutes. So I know that's not probably where we're heading initially with the question, but that's really the benchmark. When it comes to how much do we need to do after that, beyond the 20 minutes, obviously if you're training for a marathon, a single run of 20 minutes is probably going to be bugger all for your training. And it's definitely going to be under preparing. If we're training for like a half marathon though, and we're starting to get up into some of these long runs, maybe a 2-hour run, is it better to go and do 1 2-hour run on the weekend, high intensity throughout the week? Is it better to do 2 1-hour runs in the week? I always typically, for the most part, look at how can we get the athlete to spend time on legs to about 110% of your estimated race time or estimated split time. Why I say split time is because triathletes, obviously, split time is going to be different to event time. I don't want you going out there and trying to practice a 10-hour Ironman long, slow effort. Go out and do, if you're planning for a 3-hour marathon, if you're a marathon runner or you're planning for 5 hours on the bike in an Ironman, you want to be building up to just over that in terms of amount of time in that session. That gives you the aerobic capacity and just that mental ability, but also the muscular endurance to work for that period of time. So I'd probably prefer somewhere in your program, if you're building up to a half marathon, for example, Alan, just as an example here, if you're building up to a half marathon, you're aiming to do 90 minutes, you're aiming to do an hour 40, whatever you are. Building up to something like a single 2-hour run is probably going to be quite effective. Yeah, it's probably a bit longer than what you absolutely minimum need to do, but doing that is going to be effective because it's going to teach you to just run for 2 hours at lower intensity. You go and do your race-specific prep, you come in, and running 90 minutes is a lot, even though it's at a higher intensity, it's a lot easier than what running 2 hours was from a mental perspective anyway. So you've got the muscular endurance to be able to go for 2 hours if you really need to, but you only have to run for 90 minutes, if that's what makes sense. Whereas 2 1-hour runs never really prepare you. Yes, it's the amount of training load in a week, but they never really prepare you for that one. So I always like to have at least one big session where we are building up ideally to 110% of your estimated event time. Again, not always practical. Ironman athlete, you're probably not going to go out and do a 4-hour run after you've done a 6-hour bike on the Saturday or a 5.5-hour bike on the Saturday. That's where we can get a bit more creative, do like 2 hours in the morning and then 1 hour in the afternoon or 45 minutes in the afternoon. That split run is perfect because Ironman, you start at 6 a.m. The last thing you want to do at 5 p.m. in your training day is be running. So go out on a Sunday afternoon when you're fatigued and tired. That's what you're going to be facing on race day. So it is specific. I like that. And you're already getting enough muscular endurance that it's just about putting one foot in front of the other at that point in the race. So it's not, I'm not overly concerned. But some of the shorter distances like marathon, and particularly the faster you get at marathon, half marathon in particular, 70.3, they're much easier to get those 110% of estimated race time or estimated split time in your long, slow run is that ideal to build up to. Just gives you enough endurance in the legs, really simply. Trained running for 3 months and my VO2MAX didn't change a bit. What could it be? I followed Garmin's half marathon plan. Follow up to this, by the way, my times did go down quite a bit. So looks like from a performance output, your times have improved, but not necessarily VO2 max. What I'm going to suggest is the case here is probably Garmin's half marathon plan had a lot of threshold and tempo running. I'm just guessing. I haven't seen what their most recent one is, but let me know if I'm sort of bang on the mark there. What they've probably done is, because you're coming from relatively sort of, if you're coming from a low base, for example, and you haven't done much, you do 3 months of sort of very specific training. We increase the percentage of our VO2 max we can hold. So you're not actually changing the size of the engine. You're inserting the cylinders. And that's going to lead to improvement in performance. Absolutely. If you're a V6 engine running on 4 cylinders, you go to a to do threshold, tempo, race specific, which is typically what these Garmin type plans are going to do for the most part, and target that part of your physiology. It'll boost you up to a V6 running on 6 cylinders. So of course you're going to be able to go faster in some of those efforts. VO2 max isn't going to change though. That's the kicker. If you were to go away and do some really high intensity stuff, easy way to do it, field test. We spoke about VO2 max testing before. That would be your ideal. If you're in Melbourne, come and see me at Mets. Happy to help you out. If you're not, go away and do something like a 2K time trial. Is a really good one. Go as hard as fast as you can for 2K. Take your average pace over that distance, and that's going to be your VO2 max pace, pretty close to, right? That's a good one to then test if VO2 max is changing, is if you get faster in that 2K time trial. That's a really simple one. If you get faster, VO2 max is likely changed, because to be able to move it up, you either have to significantly improve your economy, which for the most part is going to be accompanied for most amateur athletes or average athletes, if I put it that way, in the nicest way possible. That's where you're going to have an increase in oxygen consumption as well, rather than just running economy. So really easy to see that VO2 max is probably going to change. If you are looking at VO2 max as well as part of your watch, I mean, I've personally gotten a hell of a lot fitter over the last sort of 6 weeks just from my own training program, and I've gone from 57 to 58 on my Garmin. That's just kind of the way it is with the algorithm. Sometimes it's a little bit broken and it doesn't really do what we want it to do. But always the type of thing that it probably is more that you've improved your percentage of VO2 max and your threshold in relation to where your engine is, rather than changing the engine size. You've gone. All right, moving on to Chippy Brown here, who I've just seen in the chat. Zach, I believe this is. Pools are open. What is the best way to use 45 to 50 minutes? Great question. But to begin with pools being open, particularly for our Melbourne-based athletes, we've just had pools reopen recently. Some of the other states are a little bit different. You've probably had pools for a little while, and internationally it might be a different scenario. We've only got 45 or 50 minutes in the water, so you have to make the most of it. I would be saying it's all about, first and foremost, just getting a feel for the water again. So if you're going in, let's say 2 swims a week, one of those swims you want to be a bit more technique focused and just try to turn the arms over and get some muscular endurance back into the upper body. So just swim continuously, or swim longer. When I say longer intervals, 300s, 400s with a short rest. Don't have to be pushing yourself super hard. We just want to build some general aerobic ability back in. We also just want to build that muscular endurance and that upper body side of things as well. Your other swim, high intensity. Get the speed back into your stroke is going to be critical, and the technical side of things also. Don't just smash your arms around. Technical side of things is key too. So I'd be doing things like 50 meters as flat out as you can. Maybe turn around depending on how fast you're doing 50 meters, turn around on the minute or the 90 seconds. 100 meters with a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio is good. 50 meters with a 1-to-1 work to rest. So if it takes you 45 seconds to swim 50 meters, take 45 seconds rest. Then do like 10 of them. You should be able to turn that around pretty well, or start with like 8 or even 6. Keep it quality though. If you start to drop off in the quality, so let's say 100 meters wise, and I can get down, when I'm reasonably fit, I can get down to like 90 seconds, which I know is for 90 seconds per 100, which is for most people something reasonable, 145 thereabouts. We're all slightly different, but you get the idea. Let's say you do 90 seconds per 100, and after that you're giving yourself let's say 45 seconds rest or 30 seconds rest as an example. So we've got like a 3-to-1 work to rest ratio. It's really good for building aerobic endurance. Perfect. Try to get the high the intensity up there. So work pretty hard, work pretty hard intensity. But if you're aiming to do 6 of those and you get through the 5th one, but on the 5th one you actually drop down and your intensity drops, you couldn't hit 90 seconds, you're actually a lot slower and significantly slower. Like if you're 92 seconds, I'm not too fast. If you're like 110 seconds on that 5th one, stop the session there. Don't do the 6th. Quality is better than quantity in this regard to get the speed back. Next session, try to go for the 6. You might find you can get there. If you can get there, all right, next session we'll aim for 8. But again, if we aim for 8 and you can't get past the 6 one without having a big drop off, just cut it at 6. You're better off than finishing the set there than trying to push through at a slower pace and just fatigue yourself for the sake of it. So they're really some key things. Have a really quality, higher intensity, shorter, sharper session, and have a bit more of an endurance focused session, and you're going to give yourself good balance in the week from a returning to swimming perspective, because I know that's what most of us are doing. We're returning to swim rather than trying to perform at the moment from a swimming perspective. So hopefully you enjoyed some of the best questions that came through, some great discussion we had over the live stream. Make sure you join me tomorrow night, Melbourne time, Wednesday, 7 p.m. is when we're going to be jumping on. Always, you're going to be able to get the full replay of the live streams if you want to watch them in full. Like I said, last week went for about 90 minutes, so these videos are great because you can sometimes get some of the best bits and the best discussions, but I'm not putting everything in them, so you are missing out on some of the cool topics and discussions, and I'll save those for when we're on live, and you can join the conversation there. Make sure you do keep subscribing to the channel, share it with people that you think might be interested as well. Go over and check out Instagram, like I said at the beginning. Get in contact, send your questions through directly, open up the discussion. If you want to talk about a bit more of an individualized part of your situation, performance, etc., that's the best way to do it, is to do it through a bit more of a private forum. Send me a direct message on Instagram. I'll leave it down the bottom here, and as always, everything's in the description to go check those out. Hopefully you enjoyed some of the best bits from last week. Looking forward to jumping on the live again tomorrow night, but that is it for now, and we'll see you in the next one.